Welcome, grasshoppers. It is time once again for our study stream. The great thing about the rewards for studying, absolutely studying for periods of time, great players like Vladimir Kramnik. And I am hoping, of course, that the chat is going to come out on top. Let's just do that real quick. If you have not yet followed the Discord, now is the time. Looks good. Or my socials, where I announce upcoming streams, especially on Twitter. We're going to start with games from the informant. And this particular informant number 81, early in Kramnik's career, 2001, playing Darman Sadvakasov. Kramnik, of course, has always been a positional player, although he's been known to play e4. He will vary his repertoire based on his opponent when needed. D4 being no exception. And he is always Queen's Gambit player. If he's going to edge his way into the Catalan, he's always favored that. But Sadvakasov heads him off at the pass with the Queen's Gambit accepted. Now, in this particular position, we can probably start off with candidates for white. And in this particular position, there are three commonly played moves in this position. Three commonly played moves. The most popular of which, where's my timer? The most popular of which, absolutely, and we're going to hold ourselves to the 1 minute mark here for candidate moves, because I'm hoping to process as many of these Kramnik games as possible. I've added 32 to the study, and 32 games, of which we are going to try to cover as many as we can in this stream, and then we'll annotate them afterwards, and then we'll be able to continue them later. These basic choices in this position all have to do with either holding the center, attacking the center. Whoa, oh my gosh. That was close. I almost spilled my coffee as the warmer did not want to let go of my coffee. It could be time to clean the warmer. But personally, I have always considered and wanted to play e4, and it wasn't until the mid to late 1980s when this became all the rage. The main drawback to e4 is black countering with e5, which is why quite a number of players go for something much simpler, such as e3. Now, thanks to Belyavsky and Kasparov, e4 has become much popular. The scholastic level e3 move is solid, tried, and true. And it is actually geared against players holding their pawn. Now, removing the defender of the pawn is always in order. Black cannot counter with a6 because of the pin on the file to the rook, so therefore they have to play c6, and after a takes b5, c takes b5, the move queen to f3 wins a piece, as black will have to block with the knight and then interpose with the bishop when the queen takes with check. So it definitely drops a piece. But Kramnik, being a classically trained player, plays the standard move knight f3. Rogan, Pegasus, thank you. Yeah, no, I experimented with a few. I also used the short study stream with Chess Informant 150 earlier because I didn't have that much time before I was going to drive my wife to the train station. Basically, 150 is the volume that everyone should consider obtaining. This is a great place to start your subscription to Chess Informant. You can get the CD to install it on your hard drive and be able to read all of the articles. I actually thought about doing some of the historical articles as a short stream. They have a combination section, a recap of all of the tournaments, an endgame section, and a complete player index in case you wanted to follow particular players such as Magnus Carlsen or Fabiano Caruana. We will be adding some of those to our study stream. The other book, which I actually considered using for this particular stream, but I'd already prepared, the Kramnik stream, before Informant just sent me yesterday Encyclopedia of Chess Miniatures 2. You'll also find those on the Chess Informant site. And apparently my Chess Informant and my experience went by the wayside. I'm not entirely sure how. I'm going to write those down as I have to rewrite those commands as I can. But Rogan Quadraspassky back. Quadraspassky is back. Now it's going to be an entertaining stream. There's nothing like the non-subtle humor of Quadraspassky. You refuted the keto diet. It's possible to gain weight on the keto diet. Congratulations. I think you're only supposed to eat in moderation, though. So knight f3 is geared against e5, and there are quite a number of openings where white likes to restrict black, and this is no exception, as white quietly plans to recover his pawn in this manner, and black, instead of being able to play e5, since it's been restricted by the knight, decides to attack white's center with c5. Now this commonly leads to isolated pawn positions nonetheless, and here, in order to gain counterplay on the queenside, especially with a potential queenside majority of 3-2, black continues with a6. On the seventh move here, there are several popular moves. Despite the movement of the bishop to either b3 or d3, white might play queen to e2. But as mentioned, and following in line with knight f3 restricting e5, white continues with the move that restricts b5, a4. This is fully in keeping with his persona as a restricting the opponent's ideas. Earlier, we had Lauren J.W. chime in as she is studying How to Think in Chess on Chessable by Vladimir Kramnik. He mentioned that you can win games purely, you can often win games purely by restricting all of the opponent's ideas. Fully in keeping with being soft. Yeah, but I also have a maxim to a certain extent that if your opponent is having fun playing a game against you, then you may be doing something wrong. So it is possible that not allowing the opponent to have any counterplay is just as enjoyable. Absolutely just as enjoyable as going all out and playing attacking chess and trying to ignore the opponent. I'm not a big fan of knight to c6, by the way. Knight to c6 allows possibilities of shoving this isolated pawn once it becomes isolated. The exchange of these pawns occasionally inevitable. To get rid of it. So white continues along the same vein with placing the rook on d1. The queen is not targeting an unprotected bishop thanks to the queen on e2. And at this moment, Kramnik follows through with the traditional motif of attempting to take advantage of the opponent's placement of the dark square bishop by capturing on c5 and forcing him to move the same piece twice. Now, this absolves white of the tension in the center, and at the same time takes advantage of the fact that black had to move the same piece twice. At this moment, you can already tell that white is either planning on placing his bishop on the long diagonal or exchanging black's better bishop with bishop a3. And in keeping with his style, Kramnik seizes upon controlling those two central squares, d4 and e5. Now the opponent strikes immediately with e5. And we actually have to choose how we're going to deal with this the moment the opponent comes out. And we're going to go with some candidates for white. And I am going to adhere to a strict sucks by design. Indeed, I'm not necessarily going to let you have fun. Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Rogan. There's a perverse feeling of satisfaction. We're looking for candidate moves for white. Once again, the candidate's move theory is to open your eyes to all the possibilities in this position, wherein you might be able to improve yourself by increasing the likelihood that you'll find the move that the Grandmaster played in this position. Now, black has already freed his white squared bishop. Wow, that timer went by fast. Let me make sure that I actually gave everybody 45 seconds here. He sacked the bishop already. Well, certainly black gets his pawn to e4, black might be able to claim a space advantage. So keeping an awareness of the opponent's ideas is a part of your candidate moves. I'm going to rewrite the candidates to include all of this information, as you need to expand your vision looking for candidate moves, stockpiling and cataloging moves for future use as well. And in this position, how's the overlay coming, John? That's the standard one. As I was planning on rolling out a new overlay, either I was planning on running it at the end of the month, but if Rogan is going to continually ask me about it each stream, I may need to roll it out this weekend. But I have a very busy weekend ahead of me, so I don't necessarily know that I will be. The great thing is that all of the items that go into the overlay, with the exception of changing the fonts perhaps, which I haven't decided upon, like the date and the stream title content, and I will probably keep a handful of things, such as the webcam caption, except in a different color, but larger, and I'm going to try to make the board bigger, myself smaller, and perhaps even include the backdrop so that everybody can see just exactly what the dojo looks like for the most part, as it's a room dedicated to this stream. Knight c3 Pegasus, knight on b to d2, also fairly obvious. But knight c3 is Kramnik's idea. And Rogan has the hair, worth keeping. Now we can see that the move e4, which is of course the logical follow-up by the opponent, can be met by knight to g5, putting this pawn under a slight bit of ridiculous pressure. Now black has a couple of choices. He chooses to counterattack the pawn on h2 rather than defending the pawn with bishop f5. The only drawback to bishop f5 is that knight to d5 is going to set apart the possibility of an outpost. Knight takes d5 becomes illogical, as rook takes d5 forks two bishops two unprotected bishops on either square. Black may be able to hang on to those two bishops with knight e7, but after rook takes f5, knight takes f5, remember this knight is gone, queen to h5, we're planning on attacking the pawn on h7 with threat of, we're planning on capturing the pawn on h7 with checkmate, as well as a possible discovery on anything unprotected sitting on f5, so that after h6 we can scarf our pawn as needed. And there is no bishop with which to recapture. Therefore, bishop d6 counterattacks. We follow through on our idea as needed. And even though this pawn goes with check, the likelihood and threat of pieces coming into and attacking on the king side is great. So what is white going to do with his bishop but to try to throw a little bit of a wrench in the works? Basically attacking an unprotected bishop on b2, as well as trying to stop the rook from coming to the side of the board. Queen h5 is a logical follow-up. Bishop f5 defends. And now the moment of truth, as we already know what white had in mind here. And it's not that difficult a question as we look at the candidates for white. All of these candidates have been considered and chosen for their respective values. There's a little bit of a trick involved in exactly what we want to do. There's more than one thing that we can do in this position, not just to get our pawn back, but to create problems for our opponent. The real trick is seeing the move beyond this move. So seeing several candidate moves for white, while being key, means that you have to see the ideas behind those moves. And the idea behind white's next move is the critical concept in adding value to the strength of the move. Whenever I have a small bit of time, I am going to do an encyclopedia of chess miniatures. Are we missing the informant as well? I guess we are. We're also missing the informant command, which we used to have. Which is unfortunate. Very, very unfortunate. It's very strange that all of those commands are missing from Nightbot. Caesar 888, how are you? Great to have you in the stream, sir. Always great to have you in the stream. So, now that everybody has had a chance to at least... I usually use green by default and red for threats. Red for threats, and I should have probably differentiated those in the previous one. So that's a great addition to the stream. Well, Kramnik actually follows through with the help of this bishop attacking the king. So this bishop attacking the king, this bishop being unprotected, and this rook carrying lethal threats. Getting Quadra to look at the overlay. That's true. Absolutely. I don't know when it's going to get done, though. I don't know if Quadras Fasky has emailed me my emotes to be included just yet. I know he hadn't had my email before, if that was what was slowing him down. But the emotes and their arrival are going to determine the colorization of the stream to a certain extent. So whatever color he chooses, there's a dominant color in each of his emotes, which is different from the overlay that I use prevalently of green, which, as Rogan pointed out, goes against my better judgment. And it just happened to be the default positive influence, calming influence. Originally, I chose my overlay because of the default nature of the chessboard. But I will have to change my chessboard color ever so slightly too. And if it does not hit it off, I will change my overlay again. My email, I don't mind you knowing it, but it is, of course, well, let me just message it to you, just in case. It's not that hard. I'll whisper it to you. Where is it? Hold on here. Where is it? Oh, there it is. The most common one that I check, even though I use a Yahoo address as well. But I check this one a little bit more often, having whispered it to you. I'm not sure how many emotes I can use. I definitely put some in the Discord that I thought should be done, such as words such as never, never, and give up, and never, and surrender can be used. Surrender with an exclam. I thought of a few more that I wanted to add. I also might have messaged them to you directly in the Discord. But I also put some in the emote ideas that I had in the Discord stream. So the emote ideas are in the emote suggestions as well. Can't find it. Pegasus. The mighty knighty. So knight takes f7 is obviously going to be met by rook takes f7, and that makes it a little tedious to do this. But the backup, the follow-up to this, of course, is to hammer home the discovery idea with queen takes f5. And black, of course, wisely has some difficulty in allowing that discovery. Just going to make sure that I'm on the same page here. But basically after knight takes f7, if rook takes f5, rook to d8 would be checkmate. Let's just put that on the board for the most part. So we can't allow that. It's impossible to recapture the queen. So therefore he chose g6. However, bishop takes b2 could have been a much better move. However, rook to d7 is going to create the same number of difficulties as in the game. So queen takes g6. This at least puts a direct little bit of influence on the opponent's queen. And now candidate moves for white. Now you're finding several moves. Ideally, moves that are good. You don't have to find the best move, but it helps to look at many moves so that you are able to compare those moves, and at the same time by comparing those moves, you'll find a better move than the average move. They'll all be good moves, of course, but you may find the best move. Yes, indeed. The very calm and collected bishop takes e5 is the move. The main concept being that if the queen is captured by the rook, then we also have the option of winning back the queen in many ways with a discovered check, just plain recapturing, but basically it's overall devastation. And if g takes f6, one moment here. I just want to make sure, since we're at the end of the game, that black resigns is in there for the most part. Bishop takes e5, black resigns. Basically, if g takes f6, then we get to capture the queen for free, and we're winning even more material if a recapture is at all thought about because of the discovered check. And we're up an entire rook. There's just no recapturing. If rook takes f5, then we have the same concept, but different. Just going to make sure of this with a little bit of calculation. With an extra piece. We have 2 bishops, 2 rooks, and they only have 1 knight. For the most part. 1 knight. Moving forward. Hold on, I would like to have the evaluation bar on this one. And I also want to make sure that we get our computer server-side analysis. We're going to try to pound out as many of these ultra important moves as we can. But basically the power of Kramnik is the fact that he is not always recognized as such a dynamic player. Oh, you are absolutely right. It is still checkmate. Ah! So silly of me. Let's promote that variation. Sorry, I was lost in thought about another variation in my head. And Pegasus points out the obvious. There is no rook takes d5 because we can't move that because of mate. But there were quite a number of gems that Kramnik is responsible for. And given the fact that he is... wait a minute, did I turn on the engine? It is on. But there's nothing to be seen here. So therefore, we'll move on to the next one. So Alexei Shirov playing white against Vladimir Kramnik. Now, this is a little bit of a bone of contention for the most part. As almost everybody may or may not know, one of the greatest blights in Kramnik's career is losing a match to Alexei Shirov in his quest for the World Championship title. And despite Kramnik losing the match to Alexei Shirov, Kasparov chose Kramnik as the challenger to the World Championship title. It's one of the problems with... it's one of the problems with... Wait a minute, your computer didn't arrive? I thought your computer was arriving that... It does become a little bit of an addiction. Once you start streaming, you don't really want to stop. I also realize, guys, that it appeals to me as a person because, in general, while I have a lot of friends, I'm a relative lone wolf, and I like to do things just because I like to do things. I don't necessarily have to travel in packs with groups. So having all of you here sort of bridges that gap to a certain extent because there's no coordination involved. Hopefully you'll show up. If you don't, we're going to move forward with our chess study one way or the other. So in this particular instance, Kramnik bending against Alexei Shirov, and I should tell you the year. The year is still 2001. Now, let's see. Oops. Let's see how much of our candidate moves for black we might have. Oh, you have no charger yet. That's the problem. Yeah, I usually went to Best Buy. We have a place called Best Buy. I'm trying to think of the equivalent in the Commonwealth countries is called PC World. It's the same logo, yellow letters, blue background as Best Buy in the United States. And Best Buy, just like PC World, deals mostly in electronics. When I was in London, I noticed PC World. Not quite everywhere, but in Europe. And they have a 14-day return policy. So basically, you can buy a temporary charger, use it for 14 days, and then return it. Occasionally, they have a 15% restocking fee, but that's a small price to pay. Really, indeed, a small price to pay. I also need to get perhaps one of those digital timers and a little website overlay so that I can put it in the bottom left-hand corner, because much of the time the chat room space is completely unused. It's interesting that unless I click on it, you don't actually see my mouse hovering over this. Yeah, any OEM charger will be perfect. It's one of the great uses for all OEM products. I think the only one that really suffers from lack of OEMs is Apple for the most part. They're such greedy hardware, concentrated products. So in this particular position, while our time is up, most of us know that Kramnik has spent much of his career playing c5. But on the other hand, it's very little known how much e5 he has done in his career. Red card, yellow card. Yes, the yellow card emoji has to also be priceless. Knight f3, and moment of truth. Bum, bum, bum. Those of you who may have guessed that black could play the move e5 in answer to e4 might know that Kramnik does have an affinity toward the Petrov defense. It's not the move that was played here, though, as Kramnik is perfectly willing to go into his ever so solid. Now remember, the year is 2001. And he has quite a bit of a patent on the Berlin defense. And the Berlin defense is what Garry Kasparov could not crack as white in order to ensure his ability to equalize the match. So, while this is common, the best move still is castles for white. But today, most players dabble with d3 to avoid much of the theory and avoid going into the Berlin endgame. The Berlin endgame basically consists of this. Basically, after d4, knight to d6 tags the bishop, and bishop takes c6. One of my favorite lines, which has been rejuvenated, interestingly enough, is capturing this knight, or allowing the knight to capture the bishop, and then trapping it. As it turns out, I think John Nunn had given a particular variation that equalized involving knight to d4, knight takes d4, knight takes d4, queen takes d4, d6. But interestingly enough, I believe the move d6 right away is sufficient. I'm just going to check that line for a moment. Yeah, the instant move d6 is actually the move that gives black the most counterplay in this position. That's not the case, though. Very few top players go into that variation, so therefore I think that the likelihood of it being that great is gone. But we are now reaching the queenless middle game of the Berlin and white's ninth move. Now, white's ninth move has varied in this position. There are those adherents of h3, a la Fabiano Caruana, knight to c3, a la this game, and the immediate rook to d1 check, putting black's king under a bit of pressure and forcing them to place the bishop on d7. But at the same time, king to e8, keeping the king in the center while holding the center is also common. Knight to c3, bishop d7. This was a patent of Kramnik's at whatever moment, b3 and king to c8. Notice how he's following up on his ideas. And now we have one more big step in this position as we look for candidates for black. A wave of tiredness just swept over me. Do I think I'm crashing from the caffeine of coffee? I don't know. That's a good question. So candidates for black in this position are certainly no worries. Be right back. Indeed, coffee, important. What to do with this position? It's so warm in this room, I may need to crack my window open. Yesterday it was raining most of the morning, and I did not realize that I left my window open last night. Fortunately, the rain did not last that long. Hydrate indeed. I have to change my water bottle cover as well. My water bottle color was based on the stream. The carpet, the old green chair, as someone noticed, which is now missing from the dojo. We now have a marble chair. My grandson noticed the large spider in the middle of the back of the chair and instantly related it to Spider-Man without any hesitation. He recognized the Marvel Spider-Man logo. Pegasus, you're the best. So in this particular position, Kramnik does not necessarily play the best move. There are several moves in this position which are worth considering. b6, a5, and perhaps even rook to g8. Kramnik chooses bishop to e7. I also want to give some honorable mentions to the idea of playing h6 followed by g5. I drink purified and it is not water. Indeed, that is true. I have a filter on my fridge. Not to mention the fact that less than optional. And now the opponent comes up with a relatively new move at the time. Alexei Shirov plays rook on a to d1, and now Kramnik reverts to his old, or to the more tried and true traditional moves. a5, and after h3, h5 to keep his knight in the game. g3, of course, to prevent any further expansion. And now another very cool candidate move for black. This is where we pause to consider as many moves as deemed humanly possible. We could set up some tactical tricks with a bishop move at this point, or we can go for Just throwing wing pawns around. Yes. Common beginner opening. However, the nature of the game has been changed to increase the dynamics. So for the most part, time's up, and Kramnik comes up with rook a6, a rather profound move. More standard, obviously, would be moves like bishop e6 or rook to e8, preparing to put more pressure on this pawn. If rook to e8, knight to e4, black would continue with a5. Notice how the bishop on e7 is restricting the knight to the best of its ability. I don't know that I would play bishop to e6, give up the bishop pair, and have a ruined pawn structure. I don't know. So in any event, after rook a6, bishop to c1, rook to e8, bishop to g5, with a great bit of problem solving. So, for the most part. I don't blame you, Quad. It's hard to just open your eyes to almost anything. So, bishop to g5 fights for the dark squares to try to allow the knight to get there. Bishop to b4 because we don't want to necessarily lose out on our attacking chances, especially with the idea of removing the defender of a4. Friday afternoon classes. Friday afternoon classes. Have we almost been at it for less than an hour now? That's crazy. I realized that I'm going to pick up my daughter at 2 o'clock, so we're going to have a slight break in the stream. Kramnik, yeah? Logic in the house. Not just Logic, but also Rogue and Joe Sloan. Oh, what to do in this position? What to do? It's craziness. Thank you, Logic. Pegasus was pointing out that I flubbed Bishop and Knight versus King yesterday on Wednesday. I was under an amazing bit of time pressure in more than one direction. I was playing in the Offerspiel Wednesday tournament. You do get a special prize for mating with Bishop and Knight, so I was on my way to checkmating with Bishop and Knight, had him in the corner. My co-teacher comes in. It was just about 2:46 p.m. on Wednesday afternoon, and he tells me that we're overdue for picking up the kids, which we're supposed to pick up the kids at 2:45. And I'm like, oh no, you know, and then I flubbed it, and then while he's watching, I flailed about trying to recover the Bishop and Knight versus King. But of course, I'm going to run into the 50 move rule. And then, yeah, flopped. And then Pegasus has the nerve the next day to say, hey, we could have a study on how to do that, as though I don't know how to do it. Yeah, Mad Q, the poker master, is definitely there for the most part. So I love the piece relocation idea. I'm sorry, not necessarily the piece relocation idea of playing Bishop to B in order to get rid of some material. But now black truly does have the bishop pair. And it is very serious to a certain extent. If this comes about the way we want it. I would like to say that one move more than others leads to a clear advantage, but we do need to do some candidate moves for black in this position. Opening our eyes to the possibility of all, and taking advantage of the material that we have. What? Yeah, I wasn't able to stream the Opera Spiel Wednesday Arena as I was teaching. It does not sound like my stream. Ah. So, while no one is contributing these candidate moves, yes, Pegasus is right on the ball, pinpointing the weakness on c2, as well as if the rook tries to return to the square d2 to protect, making everything safe, then the other bishop is going to be coming in and bothering the knight on c3 with the help of a pin, and black will be easily overworking the white pieces. So there's only one way for the rook to go, and after the bishop captures with knight e4, black only has one further way to continue putting the pressure on white. Now, why this game ends here is a par for the course, because we can keep in mind that instead of bishop f5, g5 is also an adequate candidate move back there. So how to continue taking advantage of this position and taking advantage of the weaknesses in this position. Black is already one pawn up with 4-2 on the king side and only 4-3 on the other side of the board. If he wins, or if he takes advantage of one more pawn, it'll be overwhelming advantage. And Kramnik does manage to follow through with the idea of a4. There's nowhere for this pawn to go. It's attacked too many times, and it's just awkward. Awkward. Other moves in this position, of course, black could also try to push his pawn to c5. Possibly c4, but on average, e5, a5 does the right job. And the game somewhat ends right there. Why would white allow that advance? That's a good question. I'm not sure what he thought he was trying to stop with the move knight e4. Not entirely convinced that he could stop it anyway. Even with the knight on c3, I would almost wager to guess that the concept of pushing a5, a4 was always there. Well, Alexei Shirov certainly should never have missed it, ironically. A much better move in this position than knight e4 was probably just to push e6 and try to throw all of white's pieces for a loop while bringing the knight across to the king side. Moving on. The epic encounter, another epic encounter with Garry Kasparov is up next as we look at the match games. One of the match games that he managed to win with the black pieces. I'm sorry, with the white pieces. All well and good. The Nimzo Indian is easily the best move for equality. The drawback, giving up the bishop for a loss of time, helped people out immensely, I'm certain, in both buildings. It's Friday. Kramnik is here today. Is he? I am very curious. Given the fact that I am as exhausted as I think I am, it would be very unfortunate if Kramnik were actually in the chat. E3. Oh, I don't want to have that uncovered necessarily. So after the move E3, we are going to breeze along through most of the opening theory, controlling the center, attacking the center, isolating white's the pawn, bishop to g5, threatening to grab the dark squares as well as the light square control in the center. And black actually plays bishop to b7. Yep, indeed. This is more comfortable for white. Although the placement of the queen is always a tricky thing to a great extent. Oh, I lost track of where I was for just a brief moment in time. So after knight on b to d7, rook to c1, rook to c8, queen to b3, black retreats his bishop to e7, and we get a very simple returning the favor idea. If the knight recaptures, then white's knight on f3 gets the leap into e5. What I have a question about, though, is, are we concerned, and I am, about bishop takes f3 opening up the king side? But as we saw in a previous game today in Informant 150, having the open G file is somewhat key. No, it is, but the goal here, logic, is not to find the best move, not to completely understand everything about every concept, but to try to reach with your own vision toward accepting or considering the moves. That logo on the head of my chair. Oh, come on. It was a little bit of a gift from my youngest daughter, so I couldn't say no. Not that I'm not a DC person. I was raised on DC as well. It's just that between the two, this was the cooler one. Ah, with the threat of smothered bait. Well, now, after knight takes f6, we have to consider now how we're going to go about exactly what logic may or may not have referred to. Candidate moves for white. No, you didn't ruin the lesson. This is meant to be an enlightenment stream for the most part. But if you can imagine doing anything like this to Garry Kasparov, it would be a truly beautiful thing. I'm also going to mention one of my greatest faux pas in tournament play, turning down a draw offer with some similar thing. And as hold on here 1 second, I'm just going to remaneuver my score sheet. As logic has pointed out, sometimes a little bit of knowledge can alter your choices. He must have been lousy this week. This was 2001. I'm sure that he had meant to get a little bit of revenge on Kramnik in this one, except that for the fact that he was black. This is certainly the passing of the torch, if there ever was one. Now, you'll notice that logic only gave one move. And since our time is up, logic is from Canada. I believe he is from just north of me. I believe logic is about 6 hours, give or take an hour, north of me. He is. It's Commonwealth. They're all the same. So yeah, I might put it at north of 6 hours then if you're north of Toronto. I think Toronto by driving distance, it's about 6.5 hours from New York City. But yeah, one Commonwealth person, you've seen them all. I have not been to Canada as a conscious adult. I remember when I was younger, my parents mentioned that they had been to Niagara Falls or perhaps Montreal, because that was more along the lines of the Midwest. I also thought I'd set up a reward where somebody comes and spends several days with me and appears on the dojo in person. That would be a crazy reward, channel points reward. Right? Crazy. I'm not paying for anything, of course, if anybody wanted to come, but c'est la vie, right? I think my wife would have to approve before I did that. Right? There you go. Absolutely. If you come during the summer, we have more likely a chance to enjoy ourselves than right now. And probably the same is true for me trying to visit Toronto. Right? It's crazy. Also, for a greater period of time, logic, I wanted to come to Toronto. In fact, I planned on coming to Toronto or to, I'm trying to think of the other location that I was thinking about where I just crossed the border in order to play in the WSOP, the GG poker version of, yeah, exactly. Because Toronto is not on the other side of Niagara Falls. What is on the other side of Niagara Falls? I'm drawing a blank right now. In any event, Bishop takes e6 was played. Bishop takes e6, kaboom. I realized that I didn't do the computer analysis on Alexei Shirov, Vladimir Kramnik yeah, Montreal, maybe. I'm not sure. Well, the major ones are Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto, and one more to be named later. Yeah, but you stopped looking. I think you could have found this move. Don't forget Avril Lavigne, Meg Ryan, Michael J. Fox, Daniel Negreanu. Anybody else? Drake, yes. All the Degrassi, Jim Carrey, there we go. Got a lot of Canadians that have made it in Hollywood for the most part. And many, many more. Exactly. And a cast of thousands. Ah, yes, the name drop emoji. So after bishop takes e6, by the way, f takes e6, queen takes e6. Black cannot obviously recapture block with the rook because of the aforementioned threat. Knight to g5. Could be awkward. And then, of course, we wouldn't have any opportunity to play bishop to d5 because after knight takes d5, queen takes d5, the rook on c8 would be hanging as there would be a black rook on, and the king would be here on g8. Ah, yes, the greatest of them all, Wayne Gretzky. Did he... Did he marry Jennifer Jones? No. Yes? Trying to think of who his wife was. Very attractive. Thinks I had a crush on her from the summer of '42. The Wayne Gretzky chess. I think Wayne Gretzky handles himself better on the ice than Magnus Carlsen, although there's no doubt in my mind that Magnus Carlsen can skate, can skate pretty well. So in any event, king to h8. We get to recover our piece. And of course, black does not necessarily need to trade queens. Instead, black kind of goes for as much counterplay as he can get. So knowing what logic is referred to, we have to consider what is going on in this particular position. What is going on? And we're going to go with candidate moves for white in this position. This one is much easier. Yes, that was, don't forget the railroad tracks. Bullwinkle? Was Bullwinkle set in Canada? Rocky? I think Logic and I are roughly the same age, 39. So Logic did answer that question. He's a year older than he was last year. Cheers. I'm with you. My rumored to be 39 EXP is missing. I don't know what happened to it. I'm really bummed. I believe that I was transferring them over to MooBot for a regular rotation in the cycle, and it did not make it. Let's see if it is in the cycle for we do have the dojo. I do need to do join. Are we doing candidates for white here? Yes. There are only 2 moves, and you have to pick the better of the 2 moves. Ideally, pick the better of the 2 moves. Harry and the Hendersons. Got it. Coronation Street. Well, it could be worse. We could be watching Downton Abbey. So, interestingly enough, oh, Due South. I remember that show. I do remember that show. Queen takes d8. Rook on c takes d8. G takes f3. Rook takes d4. Rook e7 is a clear slight advantage for white. Black, of course, can try for some more counterplay, but this can run into further problems as we get an opportunity to defend and counterattack with Rook f7. So, as it turns out, white actually recaptures with the pawn. The very natural move causes further consternation, as there's not necessarily anything real for an advantage here. After all, white could be slightly better, but how to go about accomplishing our goal is the question. Candidates for white. I think the last guy, although I'd never do it to Quadraspassky, that commented on my age, or that was hounding me for my age, I actually banned him. At first I deleted his messages, and then I banned him. Yes, Logic hit the nail on the head. We don't have to wait for it. If we're going to migrate our knight toward f7, we're going to have to do it now. Queen takes b2, rook takes, and knight to d6. So here, we just have to set up one more small trap, right? And it seems like everything is in order. So black only really has one useful move in this particular position. He could try to escape with h5, but instead chooses rook to f8. And it was at this point that I began what I considered to be a winning maneuver for the most part. My opponent offered me a draw, as he only saw a perpetual check, indicating that he was never going to capture my knight on f7, but I followed through in my game with, and this was the Armed Forces Championship of 1988. The Armed Forces Championship of 1988. Overlooking the fact that my opponent can recapture with the knight. I flailed on for a little bit more, and I know, right? Yeah, my opponent offered me a draw here. My opponent offered me a draw here in a similar position where I had this in the arm. I was rolling along, actually. I was rolling along to win the Armed Forces Championship, and this severely deflated me, as I should have just played for the draw and kept my position in the tournament. But I literally threw it away with one fast move, not looking at all of my opponent's moves, because the rook can now defend. I know. I did this in one of the earliest, most important... Exactly. I did this in one of my earliest, most important tournaments. The Armed Forces Championship was... The first leg of the Armed Forces Championship is a battle of the sea services. So 6 players from the Navy / Coast Guard would meet 6 players with... I think it was, I'm trying to think, it was all the sea services. So we had the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Coast Guard in the qualifying stages. And the best players from that would move on to the Armed Forces Championship, which would include 6 players from the Army, 6 players from the Air Force, and then 6 players from the sea services. Easy. I live in a Marine Corps neighborhood, actually. We got a wonderful, super nice Marine down the street. And we have one fellow across the street to my right who's I am a veteran. In fact, I had a ribbon from the Gulf War of 1992, 1991, or 1990. I'm trying to think of when that was, because I was in the service until May of 1992. When I saw Bill Clinton coming in, I got out, because he literally destroyed the armed forces. There's no armed forces championship like there used to be. And if there is ever a wonder as to why the military does not like the Democrats for office, it is that reason, is that they just take away the money from the military, which destroys the morale of the military. It's not so much that you're taking away money from the military to reduce the amount of weapons or the atomic capabilities or the destructive capabilities of the United States military, but it's that they end up taking the money out of the common functions. So all of the buildings, the living quarters, the maintenance of structures, the maintenance of recreational facilities, and all of the money is taken away from any morale type building. So if there were sporting contests, let's just say Muhammad Ali was in the army, and basically he was in the army as a boxer. He basically traveled around conducting boxing matches to boost the morale of the armed forces. And they would all gather, and it would be an exciting time, and it was fun for the average person in the military. But when you take all of that away routinely and often, you cannot expect anyone to vote for you. And that doesn't happen with the Republican Party, even though the Republican Party has turned out to be morons on a different level, for the most part. So here we are. Knight to d8, check, king to h8, and of course the key move in this continuation, candidates for white. Yeah, right? I did not have this move in the game that I was referring to, unfortunately, because there were more pieces on the back rank than this. But I should definitely have taken the draw. And that would have saved me a lot of grief and sleepless nights. Yes, logic has ironically pushed out all possibilities as the rook has no moves. There's no way to defend the rook. There's no way to stop the devastation that's about to happen on the back rank. That's it. Game over. I mean, Kasparov, it's crazy, right? Kasparov, of all things. After all, the smothered mate that Logic was talking about it could still happen on the board. Well, I've actually shown quite a few games, Logic, with, let me go back to this game for a moment and request a computer analysis on this one, if I can. Is it done? I don't know if it's done. But we're going to move on to the next one. We're doing pretty well. We're moving along at breakneck speed. Breakneck speed. The next game is Robert Hubner. Hey, that thing just goes away automatically when I change games, yeah? So, all in all, and for the most part, we have Kramnik on the white side of yet another, believe it or not, Queen's Gambit accepted. So you can see that since Kramnik favors knight f3 and these Catalan structured Queen's Gambits, basically I did want to celebrate. I did my morning stream for the birthday. I actually almost changed the morning stream so that I could celebrate the arrival of Informant 150. I have to change the image up there and the transparency. And ECOB to the left I was going to replace as well with the latest thing that I'm pushing, because they sent me the Encyclopedia Chess Miniatures Volume 2. Encyclopedia Chess Miniatures Volume 2 is all like Super Grandmaster games, 20 moves or less, played between 2014 and 2021. Now, there are over 1,200 games in this volume. The previous volume, which I have several copies of, not just here, but at school, and I have really dog-eared copy for the most part, is the original Encyclopedia of Chess Miniatures. There are 1,600 games here, from the 1600s to 2014, roughly, or 2013. And I'm not completely done with this. Of the 1,600 games, I think I'm only 8. Enjoy the rest of your day, Logic, for him. If you need further instructional streams, he does a bit of instruction and discussion on chess. And well, given the fact that I'm completely surrounded and immersed in chess knowledge, like the entire room is filled with chess knowledge, I should be much higher rated. Roger, rocking the comb and the pants swag. Is he on my buns there? Yes. That is just in case of emergency. Yeah, for the most part, I wear a fedora, and the comb is sometimes an essential recovery tool to taking the hat off. How on earth do I go through the? Well, lately I've been doing them in lessons. Basically, I will take this book, and I have many dog-eared pages, depending on certain students' post-it notes that will help me, that guide me toward where certain students are, what I can use for certain lessons, what the themes are of certain games. And in this manner, and I haven't actually done any of that, obviously, to this book yet. Pristine. I started actually post-it notes. I haven't had the book. I haven't had the book 24 hours yet, and there are already 2 post-it notes. The D16 to 19 Zoltan Riebli openings encyclopedia. You know, the monographs, I did not concentrate on that much. I'm trying to think. I do have some monographs. For example, I have the Sojin Sicilian monograph, which might be the B86 to 87 Sojin Sicilian monograph. But I don't have them in the right order. Yeah, you definitely need a brush, not a comb. You need a certain type of brush too. They make the bristles in a variety of ways. Needless to say, getting back to our game, just so that we don't distract from Pegasus' study, which of course the camaraderie is key, we're going to reach the first position that we saw today with A6, and in this particular case, we already know our 3 candidate moves: placing the queen, choosing a square for the bishop, or the restricting maneuver. And the year is 2000. I'm not sure if it's before Kramnik became world champion, but it is Dortmund of 2000. Horsebrush reinstates lost follicles. I know, right? Jesus Christ. But in this particular game, Kramnik actually goes for piece play with bishop to b3. And after c takes d5, e takes d5, knight to c6, black attempts to tie down the queen from ever being able to go to e2. This creates another type of problem. So therefore, there is a Capablanca game where Capablanca sacks the d4 pawn, knight takes d4, knight takes d4, queen takes d4, rook to d1. I'm trying to recall how that game continued. Basically, after rook to d1, the queen went to g4 as part of a further exchange of stuff. I'm debating whether or not white played f3 in that position in a Capablanca game. But it was one of Capablanca's best endgames. One of Capablanca's best endgames. Needless to say, we're going to continue on our merry way with rook e1, and after castles, we're going to do the candidate moves for white here. While I give Rogan and his bristling humor, slaying chess and better hair, a shout out. And we're going to set our timer while I use the facilities also for coffee. It's a multi-purpose command. Did not get deleted at least. We are back. D5, bishop to G5, standard. Absolutely standard. One standard move not mentioned yet. Two standard moves not mentioned yet. Kramnik comes up with something completely out of the box. So basically, in this particular position, White's standard ideas previously played in the informant was the concept of A3 with the idea of bishop A2, bishop B1, or queen to D3, bishop C2 while covering that square. And putting pressure on the H7 pawn. Another standard idea, of course, is bishop F4. And as Pegasus pointed out, D5 is always an option, as well as putting the bishop on G5. However, Kramnik goes balls to the wall with H4. Balls to the wall with H4. And while this is not necessarily the best move in the position, by far, the move is, however, uber aggressive. Basically, knight A5, bishop C2, B5, grabbing the space. And we already know what happens next because we want to threaten mate. We talked about this concept. Black is not at all worried. H5. And it's right about this time that I think Robert Hübner, who is a truly great West German grandmaster in his own right, decides to scarf a pawn. Little John, exactly. So bishop takes F3, queen takes D4, and candidate moves for white. Set our timer. I need to set the timer so that I can really see the, when it's below me, I can't always see when it's run out, but I can see it this way. It needs doing. It can be done. You're going to reach 2200 before I get off of 2200 at this pace, at the present pace. That's what I'm thinking. So believe it or not, Starkist, the engine, does believe that black is slightly better thanks to the material edge. By the way, I'm extremely appreciative to all of the contributions that Pegasus has made toward the stream in the terms of 5 gifted subs, being rewarded by a 3-hour stream. Yeah. I can see that. There are a couple of other ideas here. Following up on our ideas is one thing. H6, for example. Bishop G5, for example. Following up on our ideas. The idea of bishop G5 being perhaps even to play rook on A to D1. But Kramnik comes up with a combination of all of the above a little bit differently. I usually just go all in with pocket threes. I have a 48 to 50% chance. Now he doesn't go that route, but he does, since our timer is up, play the move bishop f4. And this has the same idea as bishop g5 with the added possibility of going after the queen Greenwich Village style from behind. And Robert Hubner, of course, not sensing any danger, believe it or not, plays b4, allowing rook on a to d1. And after queen to c4, bishop d3. And after queen to c6, after all, we have been trying to achieve this particular goal. White to move, candidates for white. This is a lot easier. Much, 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 much easier. I'm trying to decide if I do take a 20-minute stream break to go and pick up my daughter at 2 o'clock and bring her back. What to do? I think I will put on Lee Chess TV for a short period of time while I'm gone. X-ray of John. Line him up. Indeed, that's possible. Absolutely, that is definitely possible. The X-ray is a very unusual term, and it translates differently across continents. Basically, in some countries, an X-ray is the same as a skewer. And I think that's the context in which Quadraspassky is referring to the X-ray. But the X-ray, on the other hand, also leads to another particular variation, which I think I could show in the context of this game. The way I learned an X-ray. Yes, knight e4. Does he have to capture? The answer is no. He can actually try to anchor himself here with knight to d5. And then we're going to do some candidates again. Candidate moves again for 60 seconds. Time to pause. Right? He doesn't want to just do it. But I will show the difference between a skewer and an X-ray. Obviously, if the knight had captured on e4, the bishop takes e4 would be skewering or hurdling. In the southern United States, they call it hurdling in some areas, or they did. Hurdling through the rook, through the queen to capture the rook, which would be a material game. It's quite impressive. These instructional streams are brutal on my viewer count, by the way. Brutal. I think if I have enough time this afternoon, I will also do another stream for either a simul. My brain is fried. I know, right? We've got a lot more to do here, Rogan. Got a lot more to do. We're not even done. After this, I have the 6-hour Magnus one, which I think I have to do on Sunday, for the most part. 6-hour Magnus stream, which I am probably going to draw from these miniatures for that. Because I haven't finished the preparation for that. The preparation for Magnus is relatively easy. The guy has a plethora of games that are all worth going through at any given moment. The guy exhales good games, one way or the other. We could do the article in the latest Informant on his win from the Meltwater Champions Tour in the final. See how many games he has in here. The very first number right after the name in the player index here is the number of entries. So, for example, Jobava has 8 entries. And for 5 gifted subs, we would do 3 hours on Jobava easily. The guy is so creative. And he has the same number of entries in this book as Carlson. Carlson has 8 entries in this book. And since we're only 4 games in of this 3-hour stream, with roughly an hour left in the stream to go, actually more than that, I apologize. Just looked up at the uptime. I have to extend it a little bit. I thought about I have to get back to doing some simuls. Simuls grow the dojo. But I was going to run down we have the Labordonnais stream, Kramnik Topolov. I still have 12 hours worth of rewards to do after this stream. And that doesn't count me wanting to get in some other streams. But I have the games for the Labordonnais stream at least, thankfully, to get through. I'm not going to purchase the $300 book from Fred Wilson Books. Don's had a plethora. A plethora of Pegasus particulars. All right, time's up, and no one has made the stab at this one, because this one is key. It stems from the fact that we want our bishop on e5, and that is relatively key. Another move that is also certainly worthy to a great extent is the fact that we can just plow away with 8-6. 8-6 is worthy. My older version of Stockfish also believes that knight to g3 may be better. Believe it or not, may be better than bishop to e5. But we'll leave that one for the analysis engine later. But bishop to e5 has a standard idea in mind. Black plays f5. And the simple maneuver, remember, we have to look at the idea behind the idea of our move. f5. I'm sorry, threatening checkmate after f5, threatening checkmate on g7 with queen to g3. And now at long last, we finally have to move our knight. We did have a choice of possibly moving the knight to g5, but we don't really want to exchange material and allow black an opportunity for a defensive comeback through the exchanging of our attackers. Attackers do not want... Yeah, Harry, exactly, John. Explain this knight move. Well, unfortunately, if we were to go forward, we're going to exchange off, and we're going to allow our opponent to build up a little bit of a defensive cache where he might even be able to guard across. We might have some back rank stuff, we might not. And it's just not worth it. So for the most part, the queen gets to come in. White is still better, if not winning, clearly better, after moves like b3, knight to c6, and we can park our bishop back here. And there's nothing wrong with this particular picture. But all in all, we've allowed black some resources, and we've traded off a valuable attacker. So in general, it is much better to keep the pieces on the board and keep, because black has less space, this bishop's in the way of the defense. Knight takes rook was not a move. If knight to g5, the bishop just takes off. So we don't really want to exchange off our attackers. Is there another move that we could play? I don't see it. On the whole, we don't want to exchange. Yeah, that's okay. Don't want to exchange off our attackers. So, but yeah, bishop takes g5, eases the coordination of the forces across the back rank, and we don't really want that. I'm not a big fan of the idea of the analysis being here. Uh-oh. Moment of
So,
truth.
hey, Pop. So, what's the plan? Are you gonna come get us at 2, or are you gonna come get us before 2?
How about 2:30?
2:30? Okay, I guess. David, you want? Yeah, never mind. I'll just have David take us home because I don't really want to.
No, no, no. I can come. I can come
If,
at 2.
yeah, could you? Because I'm going out tonight and I need to get everything done before Sarah gets here at 5 because I'm
Okay,
leaving at
I've got
6.
you on
So.
speaker on stream, so I'm glad you haven't said anything else. But meanwhile,
Like what? Like what? Like
no,
what
no,
did
I'm
I
doing a.
say?
I was doing a 3-hour stream, and I'm just going to take a 10 to 15 to 20-minute break to pick you up, and then I'll come back and I'll continue it.
Yeah, it'll be less than that anyway.
Okay,
Yeah, just text me when you're leaving and I'll be ready to leave
sounds
out the door.
great. No, I'll be there
Yeah,
right
so
at
if you
2.
could be here at 2, that would be great.
I'll be there right at 2, give or take a
Yeah,
minute.
yeah, no problem. Thanks, Dad.
All right, Angel.
All right.
Talk to you
Bye.
soon. Bye. Love
Yeah,
you.
bye.
Don't you love it when you put them on speaker? Everybody else, I love it when Daniel Naroditsky or anybody else, like they're on the phone, right? And you're watching them on the phone, and they've got the stream muted, and they're not reading the chat, and they're not doing any of that stuff. And you're like, what? I mean, you could at least excuse yourself from the room rather than be on the phone in front of the live audience, just saying, you know what? You're not important enough. Let me just take this call. I don't mind sharing the call. I just have to remember to get it in that she's on speaker, on stream, early. Uh-oh. What's going on here? Namaste, Pegasus. Yeah. But yeah, then I just have to extend it a little bit. Take a smidgen of a break. Do 1 hour. Yeah, right. Exactly. She was just trying to get me off the phone. That's it. So anyway, knight to d2 keeps the pieces on the board, and now this gives black a little bit of room to muck things up. Honestly. Does give black a little bit of room to muck things up. Black should, of course, play queen to d7 here anyway. And instead, after knight to d2, plays the move knight to b7. Now, I've actually heard Anand or read Anand in commentary comment that, or that was redundant, but in commentary say that the b7 square, b2 and g2, not to mention g7, the knight's 2 squares are the worst possible squares. That is my WhatsApp going off. That was a confirmation from, or my wife saying, it's bad sound with applause too? No. That's what I need to check. Where was that? That was at 142. I need to see it. That's no good if you're paying for bad sound. Maybe I need to mute it on my end, but then again, what can I do? It is intuitive, but really, what is the point of this? Is he coming back in this particular direction or that particular direction? I don't know what the last message was. I have a class this afternoon, and that last message was about whether or not I'm teaching the class this afternoon at 4 o'clock, which I am. So meanwhile, back at the ranch, you don't see the threat? Well, you're going to go find your local tech dudes. That is the way to do it. Definitely find your local tech dudes. So white now regroups, and you can see that this is a very serious threat, pinpointing these weaknesses and striking through, not just, unfortunately, the G5 square. And the moment of truth. I love saying the moment of truth. Candidates for white. Candidates for white. Let's do it. The Black Knight does threaten to take our bishop, which is kind of a bother. Kind of a bother. 8-6 indeed. Try to think in terms of throwing several darts at a time. Go to the pub, and you're given the opportunity to throw 3 darts, and you only throw 1. Your teammates are going to be very unhappy with you. Dude, we gave you 3 darts. Where are the other 2? I know you gave me 3 darts, but I'm that good. I only need to throw 1 dart. They don't give you 3 darts. They want to know where you're putting the first one before they give you the second one. They don't trust you with 3 darts. I'm sure there's more than one way to catch some lass's attention using darts. Or the shot, or the, I'm trying to think what that's called. The shot put. So bishop c7 would be great, but for the knight on d5, or is there a further concept there? I think Rogan should go see the tech dudes in 20 minutes when I have to depart. So bishop c7 could be getting ahead of itself. It does have the right idea. Having seen enough Kramnik games, I know what Pegasus is referring to. So the question is, as time is up, how valuable is the concept of playing knight takes f5? Now, interestingly enough, bishop c7, knight takes c7, can we still do the same idea? Well, let's take a look. I don't know, it doesn't seem to have the same conceptual idea. Let's just take a look at what happens after the game continuation. Obviously, we can check the evaluation gauge thud, right? We're down a piece versus knight takes f5. And after e takes f5, bishop to c4 pinpoints the weakened diagonal. So in our initial position, if you were going to play the bishop move first, then after queen to c6, this move also maintains the same initiative with the same threat of removing the defender. And also keeping in mind that bishop c7 could be a bother. So as it turns out, he plays knight takes f5, gets rewarded, manages to put his bishop on that particular square, tries to give back the material. And then, and only then, with this bishop being completely unprotected, removes the defender. Because now we have the winning of the pizza and the pressure on the rook. So it's really unfortunate that no matter where he goes, we have no way of guarding. Did the queen have to go to that square? Well, we also have to watch out on this end of things too, right? Rook takes. You would have. Oh, pizza time. That is true. I haven't had lunch. I might need to pound lunch into the same exact thing. But let's request our computer analysis on this one. Pray that our computer analysis is complete on the two previous games. Shirov, yes. And not Sedvakasov, but Kasparov, yes. And now we're moving on to not Svidler. I don't really want to beat up on fellow dojo legend Svidler, but we're going to go with Bologon. This is another not quite miniature game. E4. Now remember, we did mention that Kramnik is both an E4 and a D4 player. And against E6, this is the time to chicken out. So on move number 5, I always like to use candidate moves for white. I always like to see what of 3 possible moves. There are 3 very popular moves in this position for white. One being trendy, the other one being better. I play the move that Fischer would have played. Reported in bed already, indeed. Where's my extra book pane? That's what I want to see. Just in case. For the statistics, for the boys. What is the most recent thing to come out that is notable? I did not finish The Marksman with Liam Neeson on Hulu. Did I? Oh my God, did I fall asleep on that last night? That's terrible. Knight to c3 is perhaps the currently most popular move. The trendy move, as Pegasus has pointed out, is c4, and the move of my generation, which is still the best move, percentage-wise, the move of my generation, which is I will find you and I will hurt you. I'm the wrong man. I have the abilities. I have the skills. I will find you. Nobody? Well, the move of my generation is Bishop d3, which still has the greatest percentages. Still has the greatest percentages of success. It's a Fischer-esque type of move where c4 is played later. Kramnik, of course, plays the trendy c4. I personally feel that knight to c3 is a question mark move. I do. When black already has a6 in, with the idea of b5, b4, I believe that if we can avoid playing knight to c3, that's one thing. I did want to also show, before we got too deeply into this, the concept of the X-ray using Adams Torrey. Uh-oh. lose my knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, d4. This is great. This game, not knight takes d4, but queen takes d4. Bishop d7, bishop takes, castles, knight f6, knight c3, bishop e7, knight d5. Takes, chip away, reinforce, castles. Bishop g5, rook e8, rook e1, a5, this classic. Rook c8, doubling rooks. Queen d7, avoiding any trouble on f6. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6. And the x-ray that I wanted to show begins with queen to g4. And c4 is not a move, yeah. Queen to b5, because we cannot capture because of the back rank mate threat. So we'll replay that one again. And when I was younger, in this particular position, I did not really appreciate the correct continuation of a4. Basically, a4, queen takes c4. I'm sorry, queen takes a4. Rook to e4 takes advantage of the weak back rank yet again. And after queen to queen to b5, queen to b7, black resigns. Let me clean that up a bit. Delete from here and delete from here. Basically, black resigns in this position, and that was, of course, 23 moves. As I said before, it doesn't belong in the traditional miniatures encyclopedia. However, when I was younger, I actually thought that queen takes b7. This was a real game, perhaps a composed game that was made up between Adams, I'm trying to remember Adams' first name, who was the coach of the young Carlos Torre in 1920. Basically, queen takes e2. So here's the first example of an x-ray. The first example of an x-ray is that it looks like knight e1 will protect, but we are able to capture through this rook with the help of that rook. So it's not technically a skewer. Michael Adams. Yeah, not 1920. This is before Michael Adams was ever born. Uh-oh. I almost burned my coffee cup. No good. I didn't realize I was out of coffee. That's crazy. When I put it back on the burner. The second example of an x-ray, which we can look at from the main line of the game, is that rook takes e4, queen takes e8. Queen to e8 looks like it holds, but because this rook is x-raying through the rook, that queen is actually attacked twice. This, to me, is an x-ray. It is 1:45 p.m. in New York. When I was younger, back in the day of Torre, indeed, 1920. So this, to me, is an x-ray where one piece is covered through another piece. It also works as a defensive tactic as well. If I could engineer it, I would, but I can't. So therefore, I won't. I just wanted to clear up that idea of an x-ray before. We're now in Kramnik, Bologon, and there are only a couple of notable moments in this game, but it is a brilliant game. One should note that e5 is off the cards because of the threats to these two squares. the help of queen to a5 check. So white actually plays knight to c3 now, having restricted b5, and now e5 is a threat, so d6. Bishop e2. All the normal, standard, hedgehog developing moves. Both sides grabbing space. And absolutely nothing wrong with everything that's going on here. Bishop a8. I would normally love to take suggestions for white in this position. There are only a handful of moves that can be played. The pawn on b2 needs to be covered, so queen to d2 is just as logical as any. I wouldn't expect anyone to play knight to b3 with a self pin. That's just awkward for that knight. Or to tie down a rook to a2, where it's just not feeling it. It's just not feeling it. Why would this rook be here? Because it has to guard the knight and it has to guard a pawn? Not happening. So queen to d2. Queen to d2 gives the rook full freedom of movement, and this knight also full freedom of movement as well, depending on whether or not this pawn gets pushed. Queen to c7. Rook on f to c1, and this is a good time for us to point out that rooks are key to determining whether or not you are the stronger player in any particular game. Yeah. Now, I've actually had students miss it in tournament games. Double battery on this square, and instead of playing rook takes to avoid the back rank mate, another rook can come back and the two pieces defend each other through each other. Is also a defensive x-ray. I was working on a chapter for the Chessable book, but c'est la vie. And now white to move. Candidates for white. I have to calculate the time into grabbing my coat, hat, and scarf because it's bloody well freezing outside. The amount of time it takes to drive there, which is roughly just short of 10 minutes. So I believe that in 2 minutes I have to start boogieing. Oh. When black played queen to c7, is knight to c5 better? It's a good question. I'm trying not to give it away, but my answer would be no. Off the top of my head, my answer would be no, because of perhaps the idea given in this game. But we can look at it afterwards. Sorry, Pegasus. I'm going to try to address that one slightly differently. Just in case. I think black might have had knight e5 instead of queen to c7. And that way we wouldn't be experiencing the technical difficulties that we are having here. So I think that would be my final answer. I think not knight to c5 instead of queen to c7, but knight e5 would have been better instead of knight to c5. And with time being up, the answer is b4. And I've actually gotten this move in myself, ironically, not necessarily because of the game, the influence of this game, but I have a game in my among my database games where I played b4. And of course, if the rook were to capture the discovery, not this particular discovery, I guess. The discovery, of course, dominates the rook. Yeah, but it's a discovery that is indirectly protecting that square. So black can't actually do it. Going back in time where Pegasus' question was, instead of queen to c7, was knight to c5 playable? I think that knight to e5 was better. Still a little better for white. Let's use the gauge here. Knight to c5, maybe it is still possible. But certainly the queen being on c7 is creating some tactical problems. And now, of course, white plows through with b5, following up on his idea. Black tries to reestablish his knight. And we can see that white's piece is a knight on the 5th rank. Look at these two knights, ridiculous two knights. Pressure on the d6 pawn, attacking, defending, and now finally attacking not just this rook, but also to prepare to remove the defender of the d6 pawn. Kramnik is quite the tactician in this sense. Knight takes d6. Black desperados, after all, that was the point in trying to drive off the rook in this particular position. So maybe he feels like he got it back, but white drives home the point with c5, and that pretty much ends this particular game, with the strategic advantage of the better pawn, the discovery on the knight, winning the piece, because black can't actually hold on in this particular position to the piece because of the pin. So honestly, that one is trouble. While I am running for it at 1:53 p.m., thank you for asking me the time, Pegasus. I appreciate it. I am going to put on Lee Chess TV for a moment, and I'm going to put Blitz on, which is joke chess. Interesting. Do we have anybody else? In Rapid, we have Casabianca. That's quite a high-level game. +0. Blitz, I don't know, 2,700 versus 2,700, slightly better. Let me take these downstairs. I'll be back. I hope you're back. Yeah, so Quadraspowski, email me when you get a chance. I don't necessarily know how many of the emotes I can use, but someone man the fort while I'm gone. I will take my phone with me just in case so I can chime in. Uh-oh, I gotta run. go. Woo! Cold. Had to put a shirt on to go outside. Short sleeves was not going to cut it. There you go, Rogan. So what's happening in this match? Oh, it's a brand new one. Johann Sebastian Christensen. Johann Sebastian Christensen took over the #1 spot on Chess TV. Who is GM Boomin? Is Johann going to get away with this? Typical hedgehog discovery tactics. All right, it took me 20 minutes, 23 minutes. Queen to C8. No longer 97. I was thinking 97, knight f5, but that's not possible anymore. I was also thinking queen c6 in that position. And now knight c5. Queen c5, bishop c5. Queen h4. The fight for the dark squares continues. Bishop f6. Can't let this square go, though. Bishop e4. Got it. Yep. Bishop e7. Queen e7. Black is toasted. Check. Bishop takes f3. And mate. Queen d4 is out of the question. Queen d2. And now a5. Doing pretty well here. Queen a5. f4. Okay, fine. Keep the pawn from moving. f4 at long last. Black should have played g5 before white could play f4. Queen e4. King g7 first. No queen e4 anymore. Queen d5. Queen d1. this is too great of a threat. King h7, queen f6, check. I was thinking queen c2. Fair enough. Before another game gets started. Whew, that was quite incredible. There's no hay of Vodchuk. Why didn't knight to d5 work with him? Yeah, Ivanchuk is pretty amazing, I have to admit. Yeah, it was bad luck in hindsight. HP I dislike immensely. I am more of an acer person. HP is a good Acer is a good choice of educators. Computer. Thank you, Quadraspassky. I'll check my email after the stream. Alienware laptop. Yeah, Alienware, I definitely looked at that. All caught up. All caught up. Where are we? Kramnik? Oh, those are the old ones. I don't know if I've gotten to those. I definitely planned on getting to those. Oh, 01. I must have done those already. Jobava Kramnik. So the computer analysis was already done on most of these. Let's do that one before it gets away. I did all of those with a student at one moment or another. We are now up to Svidler. Kramnik Svidler. So, as we mentioned before, this game very similar to the last game. C4, the trendy move. Let me get back to why I don't like knight c3 for two reasons. If we're going to go with the Tigers Modern, let's go with Tigers Modern. Basically, Tigers Modern involves a6 with the idea of counterplay with b5, b4. Anytime there's a knight on c3, the a6 move is very useful, and it is actually the whole thing that makes the Najdorf extremely palatable as well. The moment the knight reaches c3, a6 followed by b5, b4. I need a computer analysis on the last game. One moment. Did we do that? Oh, it wasn't checkmate, was it? Let me just see the previous game. This was the hedgehog. Yeah, knight c5 double question mark. They say blunder, knight e5 was best. They didn't really comment on queen c7. I love how Lichess's computer, rook takes b4 was best. Rook takes b4. Not knight to d5. Let's delete that one. Then knight to b5, a takes b5, queen takes, d takes c4, knight takes c4, knight f d7. I don't know, an exchange is an exchange. White is clearly better in this position. There's no way around that. And in the actual game continuation, he was losing a piece. And you're right, I didn't call checkmate. Ye gods, this was just a blunderfest. Yuck. Bishop to b5, rook takes c5, game over. Rook takes c5, rook takes a6, rook to b8. And only now knight takes c5. Yuck. The back rank checkmate. The idea of winning a pizza. Once again, the idea of playing knight to d5. I shouted out checkmate and never delivered. Exactly. Moving on to Peter Svedler here. So, in general, the reason I don't like knight c3 is because of the possibility of a6 and b5. Therefore, if we're in this particular situation, I prefer both bishop d3, which has the better overall statistics, aiming at the h7 square, over knight c3 as well as c4. I think there's one more move in this position after a6. I think even bishop to e2 is better. And now we have a whole different kettle of fish. It's still problematic to play e5 because of knight e4. Although I have to admit, I'm curious in this position if white could create enough counterplay on g7, but probably not. Definitely not enough counterplay after knight takes c3. Black is slightly better in that position, so therefore bishop to d3. Knight to c6 is a thematic move to tag the unprotected knight on d4. This is a fascinating move, as now black can no longer take on d4 for fear of straightening out white's pawns, but we do always have knight e5 going after the c4 pawn and looking at it as a weakness. d6, castles, and of course, as advertised, knight e5. One way to prevent further pressure on c4 is to push black into capturing the weakness, the white squared bishop. Oh, I need to look at my score sheet just to make sure I'm not missing a quiz position. Takes, takes, and now candidate moves for white. This is a little bit of a trick, obviously. And how are we going to go about it? It looks like black has got almost everything he wants out of this position. What to do? I already have my 3 moves. Make sure we put our hourglass up for the most part. This is all about trying to capitalize. I didn't get to tell Claudia how Pegasus was mindful of the time, checking with the "what time is it for me now" routine. I should have been more aware of that. Checking on my La Bourdonnais games. So what is the name? De La Bourdonnais? Yes. More than likely, De La Bourdonnais. F4? Are we looking at the same position? What to do in this position as white? It's craziness. And our time is up. So personally, I feel like F4. Queen to G3 is a worthy candidate move, absolutely. The move was actually even more positional, not unlike how you were thinking about. Oh, hold on. F5. It was bishop to G5. Interestingly enough, though, F takes E5 was quite risky. I have to admit, going back in time, F takes E5 was quite risky. The move that appealed to me most in that particular position was knight to C2. Walking into this particular situation and relying completely on bishop to G5 with the idea of, as you pointed out, E5, very tricky. King caught in the center. Basically, we're taking on F6. They're playing H6. They're taking. And after we take on H6, they take on H5. We take on G7. And the king is going to be caught in the center. That is roughly what happened in the game, with the exception of the bishop moving backwards. So now G5 can be met by Queen F3. Or is it true? Oh yeah, F5, G5 is met by bishop G3, and after E takes D4, we get to play bishop E5. And white is very close to a decisive advantage. We can't afford to take because a queen captures and then bishop captures and bishop captures for the checkers trifecta. Capture, capture, capture. So therefore, black does not have the cojones to play G5. So instead of G5, black chooses to go into the variation that we were just naming. And only now with a pawn on G5. What about G5 right away? Is it the same problem? Is it the same problemo? Rook takes F6. G8-4? Or is it... I mean, this position, according to Starkist, is completely level. It's hard to believe, because white is down a piece. I'm just checking these lines for a moment. Rook takes f6, gh4, and then c takes d4, with a massive amount of pawns. So if g5, tremendous compensation for a piece. Space, open file, d5, removing the defender of the f7 pawn, and more to come later. So, there's no queen b6 checks because of the rook guarding, which is why we don't really want to push anything too soon. a4. So meanwhile, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, ed4, e5, d takes c3. And we're getting our pizza back. Yeah? Queen takes, king takes, e takes f6, g5. And we have a bishops of opposite color position with rooks on the board. Candidate moves for white. How are we going to proceed in this position? I think Pegasus, with that last f4 move, I think he meant to say c5. I just translated it. He kept saying f4 in the previous position, but I think he was going for the big bind with c5 in that previous position. But here we're in a brand new position. Wait a minute. I didn't bring my coffee cup up. Darn it. Actually, Claudia wasn't ready for me. I did leave my phone behind. I wasn't able to text her that I was there, so she did not come out right away. So it should have been a 15-minute trip at worst. Ended up being a little bit more of a 23-minute trip. I was there roughly exactly at 2 o'clock, though. Poker terminology today. Yes. So what to do with this position? He's big blind. Oh, I left my window open while I was gone. Worked out for the best. All right, time's up. But the move, of course, isn't to guard, but to gain time by attacking. We have more than one option here when we bring this rook to the center with check. Or it's just to cut him off. That also looks very awkward. We don't have rook to e8 because of rook to d1 check, and black loses to checkmate on d8. So that's out of the question. Not happening. So meanwhile, back at the ranch, what can black do to try to survive this? Therein lies the tale. Well, he has to connect his rook somehow, so he tries king to d7, rook e7, nice skewer, and we're no longer down a piece. And up a piece. All we have to do is unpin our rook, so he chooses rook to f3 check. My apologies. I did want to quiz on at least rook c7 check. Yeah, I definitely didn't get enough quizzing in on that one. Made it on the river. You hate to see it, indeed. And now, a word from our sponsor. Are we up to Timon? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Not bad. We're up to Timon, the Tin Man. So, once again, Kramnik is white, and we get to see him, this time, not in a Khan Sicilian, but in a Taimanov. And this is more like it. Candidates for white. My voice heard different speakers. Oh, you're talking to Pegasus? Yeah, maybe. I should take this opportunity to grab my coffee cup that almost burned. Almost. C4 is still an option, yes. Less trendy against knight c6, I think. But c4 is still an option. But remember to throw 3 darts. Try to not think in terms of one. But there is one tried and true method I will still stand by in this position for white. Let me look at the statistics. Yeah, knight c3 has better statistics than the move that I would play in this position. And both of the moves that I would play in this position have better statistics than my third move, or even the trendy move. So c4 being the trendy move, I know Alexander Ivanov would often play moves like g3. C4 is certainly an option. He doesn't play that here. The move I tend to like to play is the move that locks down on that square in the old mainline format, the old mainline fashion. This does give white a healthy plus for space, but often black gets counterplay. So Kramnik's last word on this particular variation is knight c3, and after a6 he goes into the exchange variation on c6 because this pawn is cramping the style of black's bishop. Bishop d3, as advertised from the previous stream. Just like that, the only thing we're missing out on, the main thing that we're missing out on is c4. But I do still have the office angle. Take the opportunity to install, put a kettle in there. I wonder what happened with... Yeah, one of my teammates went to... Yeah, right? I don't think I play as soft as Kramnik. But I'm not sure how long it had been since he gave up smoking and drinking heavily in order to become the best player in the world. So, candidate moves for white. That's what I meant to put up here. I didn't realize I didn't put it up here. Candidate moves for white. I play very purposefully. I don't know about tough. Do the free courses on Chessable. Yeah, exactly. On the whole. Exactly. So this is a good example of the hat of the, you see my hair falling down from the hat. It's a good example of why I need the seamless comb. Not that it's going to help, because the hat is already ruined. Oh, Pegasus, defending when you don't need to. And once again, it's just one move. I called the comb. You did. You have a sharp eye. You have the eye of a designer. H4, G3. At least H4 is much more aggressive. Much, much more aggressive. Now, interestingly enough, this position has been reached, at least in my database, 18 times. Kramnik's move has been played 13 times. H4 has been played once by a less than expert player. And G3 has never been played in this position. So interestingly enough, the move that is most popular is the one that goes on the aggression with a tag on that square. What would happen on bishop h2? Queen takes g7 is not the point, because we have bishop to e5 trying to hold. But the problem, of course, with bishop h2 is that the bishop is trapped. And there's no returning at this moment to equality. Now, was knight f6 a better move? It's a tough call. After knight e7, queen takes g7, we get that winnower-esque position. The queen is actually being threatened with being trapped now. So we have to extract ourselves. I might have extracted myself all the way back to h3. The computer does not find it any more equal. But I'm looking. I can only apologize. You'd play e5? Maybe. In that position instead of queen to g4. It is a fun game. Absolutely. So black follows up with rook takes g2. And now white sets further traps. In this position, candidate moves for white. The second thought. I wouldn't throw the S word around so loosely, honestly. I would not be so tough on yourself. In an ideal world here, 2, 4, 6, 8. Ideally, I would love to do 8 games. But I don't know that the next game isn't one of the games. No, it's Topolov from 2004. Mother Nature's calling. I would hang up on her, but don't have that many choices. So how to save the pawn on h2? Candidates for white. f4 will slow black down, definitely. Are we worried about rook takes h2? I don't know. I don't think so. That's the funny part. The funny part is that after the move knight e2, which is what Kramnik played, we're not really worried about rook takes h2 for 2 reasons. One, we're going to be playing queen h8 check and picking up the pawn, picking up the material. 2, well, he played d5, but 2, after rook h2, bishop h2, the move f4, as announced by Quadraspassky, this concept of f4 traps the bishop. So, fading. We just go backwards with the knight each time. It is hard to move a knight backwards, but it's not about going backwards, Claude. It's about piece relocation, piece coordination, and piece relocation. Finding better squares, migrating with the knights. The knights actually have to do a lot more shifting than any other piece. So in this particular position after knight e2, whenever there's possible action on the side of the board, we have to shift gears and counterattack in the center. So interestingly enough, after knight e2, d5, we still have the move f4 as advertised. Remember that when you throw several moves, retreat, always retreat. Exactly. When you have the possibility of playing like that, all we have to do now is get our king out of the center. e5 grabbing space, but this is met by a small checkmate threat. What? Is that real? That's not a real threat. The surprising move here is bishop c3. Honestly, the surprising move here is bishop c3. I didn't see that many candidate moves. There was only b3 at bishop c3, and I couldn't judge. Obviously, if I were quizzing on it, you would automatically assume that you know the answer, and you would be correct. So, after the move d4, we can exchange bishops. And we have a nice little cubbyhole to hide with our king for the most part. First, though, queen to h8 check, and then queen takes c3. I was completely wrong. That's how my tunnel vision works. That is exactly how my tunnel vision works. Knight to d5 and queen e5. King to d7. Candidate moves for white. Timers. Try not to leave ourselves too short on time. I don't think I'm making it through Topolov. I think I'm going to have to call it. Time of stream, 3 p.m. here my time. Not quite a 3.5 hour stream with my breaks. I can't be stopped. H5, H6, H7. Yes, exactly. H4, H5, H6. Very good. Those aren't three separate moves, though. H4 counts as a move. Rook on D to G1 would count as a move. And we have to actually be concerned about the possibility of black driving away our queen with f6, because b2 can only be covered so much. f5, as announced by Roken. Absolutely, because now f6 can be met by queen takes e6 and devastation central. Absolutely. Basically, after f5, black has bishop to b7, f takes e6, f takes e6, and only now do we have to get a rook to the 7th rank. Queen takes d6, rook f7 check, king c6, and is this such a unique move? You are a beast. A beast. So there are a lot of moves in this position that continue the advantage for white. Let's see if we can match wits with Kramnik as I use the facilities. I should be able to use the facilities in 45 seconds or less, and that includes washing hands. Yeah, that did not include washing hands. That was not physically possible. 70% Northern English. Is this true? Oh no, I'm quizzing on the wrong move. Oh no, I am quizzing on the wrong move. Candidate moves for white here. Exactly. 45 seconds. I needed to use the facilities so badly. I really did. I needed to use the facilities so badly that I actually had a problem. With this one, right? So I had actually taken out the book. Whoops. Kramnik, My Life in Games for the prep for this, and I never quite finished looking up each of these games in the book Kramnik, Life in Games. This is from the year 2003. And I believe the book Kramnik, Life in Games is chronological, and it does not go up that far. Unless these are all over the place. Yeah, these games are all prior to 2000. Kramnik, My Life in Games. By the way, this is Carlson's #1 favorite book of World Champions, Kramnik's Life in Games. It's hard to believe, honestly, that it's his favorite book, but he models himself, styles himself after Kramnik quite well. I could picture that. That doesn't explain the Beatles, though. Their hair wasn't necessarily so extensively. Pegasus with Bishop H7, yes. There are other moves, of course, that do the job, like threatening to play Knight E4. And, of course, the time-honored classic, as mentioned by Quadraspassky, perhaps just trying to shove, and shove. But Bishop H7 is the move. I just want to see the difference in the Stockfish's recommendation. It drops to below, and then this one drops to below. So they're roughly level in strength. Bishop E4, maybe not quite as good, but almost everything here seems to lessen white's advantage. I'm curious to see what the computer's recommendation is. So rook to G2. This seems like it's a little bit of a trick, if you must know the truth. Like, how are we going to guard the pawn on H2 and the pawn on and the knight on E2 at the same time? What is the concept? Well, knight to F4, obviously, and the very simple solution. The whole point of and obviously you're going to get this one. I don't need to put the timer on. Anyone? Anyone? White to move and force resignation. Rook F6 does try to take advantage of the pin. There's a better move. looking to see where we go from here. It's crazy that my book stack is getting in the way of my monitor. I can't see the whole monitor. Is that crazy? It is not that crazy. Finally, C4 is gold indeed. Absolutely gold. It's craziness. Wow. Trying to decide where to go from here. And I guess we're just going to go with our tried and true. Nice job, everyone. Absolutely nice job. Yes, C4 indeed. Forced resignation. We got 7 games of the 32 done. We can continue to do the others in further study streams. I'm not going to put the annotations in just yet, but certainly you can test yourselves for these. And the opening book is obviously, and at 3:06, with a little bit of time for me to take a break before my classes begin. Look at Rogan. You are funny. John Curtis Chess, is he streaming? C4 is gold. That's all right. In any event, everyone, have a great afternoon. Pegasus, thank you for this study stream. And thank you for the 5 gifted subs to get us to this study stream. The only way I'm going to get my viewership up and my followers up is through more simuls. And we're going to have to do it. Time to study indeed. Ron, you're the best, man. Quadraspassky, I'll check my email. I'll also check the Discord. And of course, I'm ready for the more emotes. The words actually can be used in every stream. Never give up. Never surrender. Never F6. And all of that, right? I think F6 should be one of them. But obviously, D.